The moment you betray someone who trusted you, you set fire to your own future. That's the lesson I learned the hard way, and it's the lesson my husband never saw coming. Emily, if you are still watching my video, kindly subscribe to the channel. I was never the kind of woman who believed in fairy tales, yet somehow I had allowed myself to believe in Michael. He came into my life like a storm wrapped in charm. A tall, confident man with a smile that could disarm anyone. He seemed to understand me in ways nobody else had. When I met him, I was already successful, running a chain of boutique hotels I had built from scratch. My fortune wasn't handed to me. It was the product of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. And yet, despite my independence, I wanted companionship. He offered it. Or at least that's what I thought. Michael was attentive in the beginning. He knew how to make me feel special, how to listen when I ranted about business stress, how to hold me close when I was tired. He was a master of pretending. The first cracks appeared after the wedding, but by then, I was already blinded by the illusion of love. The argument started small. He hated how much time I spent at work. He called me cold, distant, more of a businesswoman than a wife. I tried to balance everything. Cooking for him, planning trips, even adjusting my schedule. But nothing satisfied him. It wasn't about my attention. It was about control. He resented the fact that I was wealthier, more powerful, more established than he could ever be. I ignored the warning signs until one evening when I overheard him on the phone. He thought I was asleep in the other room, but I had walked into the hallway at the wrong moment. Or maybe the right one. His voice was low, angry, venomous. He was telling someone that soon, quote, half of it will be mine. Half of it. My fortune. I froze. My heart hammered so loudly that I thought he would hear me. I pressed my back against the wall, straining to catch every word. He spoke of lawyers, of strategy, of building a case to claim that he had supported me through everything, that he was entitled to half of what I had built. The audacity left me breathless. He wasn't talking about leaving me. He was talking about robbing me through the court system, as if marriage was nothing but a heist. I went back to bed that night and pretended to be asleep when he slipped beside me. My mind raced, but I didn't cry. No, I couldn't afford tears. I had too much to lose. Instead, I plotted. The next day, I met with my attorney, a man who had been with me since the early days of my business. His name was Robert, and he was more like family than just legal counsel. When I told him what I had heard, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Emily, if this goes to trial, it will be ugly. He'll try to paint you as neglectful, selfish, maybe even manipulative. We can't just defend. We need to strike first." And that's when I revealed my ace. I had evidence. See, while Michael thought he was clever, I had grown accustomed to protecting myself. In business, betrayal lurks in every corner. I had cameras in my office, recorders in my study, and a digital system that logged every email sent through my home network. I pulled out a small device from my bag and placed it on Robert's desk. Everything he said, recorded. Robert smiled, slow and deliberate. "This, Emily, is your shield and your sword." The weeks that followed were torture. Michael played the role of loving husband flawlessly, kissing me on the forehead every morning, asking about my day, planning dinners. But I knew better. At night, when he thought I was asleep, he was writing emails to his lawyer, strategizing how to make me look like the villain. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. My hands trembled as I buttoned my blazer, but my resolve was unshakable. This wasn't just about protecting my fortune. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Michael strutted into the courtroom like a man who had already won. His lawyer was smug, carrying a thick stack of papers. They sat across from me, whispering, exchanging glances full of arrogance. I kept my eyes on the judge, refusing to give Michael the satisfaction of seeing me break. The proceedings began. Michael's lawyer painted a picture of a poor, neglected husband who had sacrificed his own career and happiness to support his ambitious wife. They made me sound like a cold-hearted machine, incapable of love, using marriage nothing more than a facade. Michael even shed fake tears, his voice trembling as he spoke about the years he gave me. For a moment, I wondered if the judge might believe them. The room was thick with tension, and I could feel eyes burning into me. But then when it was my turn, Robert stood tall and calm. He didn't waste time with words. Instead, he pulled out a simple manila envelope. He handed it to the judge. "Your Honor, inside this envelope is evidence that will make clear exactly what this case is about. Please review it before continuing." The judge opened it, slid out a USB, and inserted it into the computer beside him. The recording played out loud for everyone to hear. Michael's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating, describing how he planned to trick me, steal from me, and manipulate the legal system. The judge stopped the recording halfway, removed his glasses, and looked directly at Michael. Then he laughed, a sharp, disbelieving laugh that echoed across the room. "Mr. Carter," he said, shaking his head, "you've just incriminated yourself in your own greed." Michael's face drained of color. He stammered, tried to interrupt, but the damage was done. The courtroom erupted in whispers, and for the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. Justice wasn't just on my side, it was laughing in his face. But what came after was even more shocking, more dangerous than I ever imagined, because Michael wasn't the kind of man to give up easily. He wasn't done with me, not by a long shot. Michael's eyes burned into me as the judge's laughter echoed through the courtroom. That moment stripped him bare, exposed him for the greedy liar he was. But a man like Michael, a man who thrived on control and manipulation, didn't crumble easily. He clenched his jaw, his knuckles white against the table, and though his lawyer tried to salvage the situation with desperate objections, it was useless. The evidence spoke louder than any fabricated sob story. The judge dismissed his claims, warning him that any further pursuit would be seen as malicious intent. My fortune remained untouched. But I knew, deep down, that this was not the end. Michael's pride had taken the heaviest blow, and prideful men often become the most dangerous when cornered. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse with Robert at my side. Photographers snapped pictures, journalists shouted questions, flashes burst in my face. Everyone wanted to know how it felt to have outsmarted my husband, how it felt to watch justice tilt so strongly in my favor. I gave no comment. Revenge isn't something you brag about. It's something you savor quietly, like fine wine. But as we reached my car, I caught sight of Michael standing on the courthouse steps, his expression twisted in pure hatred. His eyes locked on mine, and in that silent exchange, I felt his promise. This wasn't over. The following weeks were tense. I thought maybe he would disappear, lick his wounds in silence, but instead, small things began to happen. First, it was anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. No words, just silence on the other end. Then I noticed my car alarm going off repeatedly without cause, as though someone was tampering with it. Once, I found the front gate of my home left wide open when I knew I had locked it. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but the unease grew heavier every day. Robert insisted I hire private security. Emily, men like him don't just fade into the background, he said firmly. He lost his case, but men who lose power often look for other ways to strike back. I agreed, though a part of me hated that Michael could still control my peace of mind. One night, as I sat in my study reviewing hotel expansion plans, I heard a noise outside. A faint clinking, like metal against glass. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed my phone and peered out the window. There, in the shadows near the garden, was Michael. His face was pale under the moonlight, his movements jittery. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to break in. Before I could panic, the security system blared. Lights flooded the yard, and my guards rushed forward. Michael bolted, but not before I saw the madness in his eyes. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was obsession. This was vengeance. The police were called, a restraining order filed, but deep down I knew pieces of paper wouldn't stop him. He was unraveling, and the more he unraveled, the more dangerous he became. A few days later, Robert called me into his office. He had uncovered something disturbing. "Emily," he said gravely, "Michael has debts, significant ones. Gambling, loan sharks, the kind of people you don't cross unless you're ready to pay with blood." My stomach churned as he laid out the documents. Michael wasn't just greedy, he was drowning. He had planned to use my fortune not only for luxury, but to save himself from the people he owed. Now that he had failed, they would come for him. And if they couldn't find satisfaction through him, they might target me. The fear that gripped me was unlike anything I had felt before. I wasn't just fighting a bitter husband, I was entangled in something darker. But fear never built empires, and it certainly wasn't going to save me now. I had to be smarter, sharper, deadlier than ever. That night, I devised a plan. Not just to protect myself, but to end Michael's games once and for all. I began digging quietly and thoroughly, using private investigators to trace every debt, every shady connection. And what I found was a web of corruption Michael had entangled himself in. Illegal poker games, offshore accounts, even ties to a money laundering ring. He wasn't just a failed husband, he was a criminal waiting to be exposed. The next time Michael tried to contact me, he did it through an email. A single line. "You destroyed me, but I'll destroy you too." My hands didn't shake as I read it. Instead, I smiled, because by then, I had gathered enough evidence to not only bury him legally, but to ensure that his so-called friends in the underworld would never forgive him. With Robert's help, I prepared a dossier. Every crime, every lie, every debt meticulously documented. We sent copies to the authorities and, anonymously, to the very people he had betrayed. It was ruthless, maybe even cruel, but Michael had left me no choice. The storm broke faster than I expected. Within weeks, Michael was arrested on charges of fraud and illegal gambling. His name was splashed across newspapers, not as the charming husband of a successful businesswoman, but as a disgraced man whose greed had devoured him whole. I watched from a distance as he was dragged into court once more. This time, not by me, but by the law itself. But that wasn't the end. Rumors spread that some of the men he owed money to had vowed to settle accounts with him once he was released. I don't know if that was true, but I never saw Michael again after his sentencing. It was as if he vanished into the shadows of his own ruin. For the first time in months, I breathed freely. My fortune was safe, my business untouched, and my life slowly piecing itself back together. But more importantly, I had proven to myself that I was not the victim he thought I would be. I was stronger than his lies, fiercer than his schemes, and far more dangerous when pushed into a corner. Late one evening, as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, overlooking the glittering city, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the courtroom, the envelope, the laughter of the judge, the terror of being hunted in my own home, and the final downfall of the man who once vowed to love me. It felt like the closing chapter of a book I'd never chosen to read, but one that I had written the ending to with my own hands. Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting victory from the rooftops. Sometimes it's about silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Heavy and cleansing. Michael had tried to steal half of my fortune, but in the end, he lost everything, while I stood taller than ever. And though I would never see him again, I knew one thing for certain. When you try to take from someone who has fought their whole life to build something, you don't just fail, you bury yourself deeper than I could have ever imagined. I turned from the balcony, closed the glass doors, and poured myself a glass of wine. Justice had been served. Not only by the judge's laughter, not only by the law, but by the cruel twist of fate Michael had brought himself. And in that quiet moment, I finally allowed myself to smile, not out of joy, but out of relief. The war was over.